Hi everybody, we're back. This is going to be Chapter 6, The Shepherdess. And I'm going to keep reading these until Uncle Rustin tells me I shouldn't read them anymore. So, here we go. "You're dead?" said Tiffany. She looked around. The Feagles were picking themselves up and grumbling, but no one was going whaley, 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 and Rob Anybody wasn't making any sense at all. "Well, if you think you're dead, then what are they?" she went on, pointing to a couple of small bodies. "Oh, they've gone back to the land of the living," said Rob Anybody cheerfully. "It's nae as good as this one, but they'll bide fine and come back before too long. No sense in grieving." The Akings were not very religious, but Tiffany thought she knew how things ought to go, and they started out with the idea that you were alive and not dead yet. "But you are alive," she said. "Ach, no, mistress," said Rob, helping another pixie to his feet. "We was alive, and we was good boys back in the land of the living, and so when we died, there we was borned into this place." "You mean you think that you sort of died somewhere else and then came here?" said Tiffany. "You mean like this is heaven?" "Aye, just as advertised," said Rob Anybody. "Lovely sunshine, good hunting, nice pretty flowers, and wee birdies going cheap." "Aye, and then there's the fighting," said another Feagle. Then they all joined in. "And the stealing, and the drinking and fighting, and the kebabs," said Daft Woolley. "But there are bad things here," said Tiffany. "There's monsters." "Aye," said Rob, beaming happily. "Grand, isn't it? Everything laid on, even things to fight." "But we live here," said Tiffany. "Ah, well, maybe all you humans was good in the last world too," said Rob Anybody generously. "I'll just round up the lads, mistress." Tiffany reached into her apron and pulled out the toad as Rob walked away. "Oh, we survived," it said. "Amazing. There are very definite grounds for an action against the owner of those dogs, by the way." "What?" said Tiffany, frowning. "What are you talking about?" I, I, I don't know," said the toad. "The thought just popped into my head. Perhaps I knew something about dogs when I was a human." "Listen, the Feagle think they're in heaven. They think they died and came here." "And?" said the toad. "Well, that can't be right. You're supposed to be alive here and then die and end up in some heaven somewhere else." "Well, that's just saying the same thing in a different way, isn't it? Anyway, lots of warrior tribes think that when they die, they go to a heavenly land somewhere," said the toad. "You know, where they can drink and fight and feast forever. So maybe this is theirs." "But this is a real place." "So? It's what they believe. Besides, they're only small. Maybe the universe is a bit crowded and they have to put heavens anywhere there's room. I'm a toad, so you'll appreciate that I'm having to guess a lot here. Maybe they're just wrong. Maybe you're just wrong. Maybe I'm just wrong." A small foot kicked Tiffany in the boot. "We'd best be moving on, mistress," said Rob Anybody. He had a dead Feagle over his shoulder. Quite a few others were carrying bodies, too. Are you going to bury them?" said Tiffany. "Aye. They didn't need these old bodies now, and it's not tidy to leave 'em lying about," said Rob Anybody. "Besides, if the big jobs find little wee skulls and bones around, they'll start to wonder, and we don't want anyone poking about. Saving your presence, mistress," he added. "No, that's very practical thinking," she said, giving up. The Feagle pointed to a distant mound and a thicket and thorn trees growing on it. A lot of the mounds had thickets on them. The trees took advantage of the deeper soil. It was said to be unlucky to cut them down. "It's nae far noo," he said. "You live in one of the mounds?" Tiffany asked. "I thought they were, the graves of ancient chieftains." "Och, aye, and there's still some old dead kingy in the chamber next door, but he's nae trouble," said Rob. "Dinna fret, there's nae skeletons or any such in our beat. It's quite roomy. We've got it up a treat." Tiffany looked up at the endless blue sky over the endless green downland. It was all so peaceful again. A world away from headless men and big savage dogs. What if I hadn't taken Wentworth down to the river, she thought. What would I be doing now? Getting on with the cheese, I suppose. I never knew about all this. I never knew I lived in heaven, even if it's only heaven to a clan of little blue men. I didn't know about people who flew on buzzards. I never killed monsters before. Where do they come from? She said. What's the name of the place that monsters come from? "Ah, you probably ken the place well," said Rob Anybody, as they drew nearer the mound. Tiffany thought she could smell smoke in the air. "Do I?" she said. "Aye, but it's no a name I'll say in the open air. It's a name to be whispered in a safe place. I'll not say it under the sky. It was too big to be a rabbit hole, and badgers didn't live up here. But the entrance to the mound was tucked among the thorn roots, and no one would have thought it was anything but the home of some kind of animal. Tiffany was slim, but even so, she had to take off her apron and crawl on her stomach under the thorns to reach it, and it still needed several Feagles to push her through. At least it didn't smell bad, and once you were in through the hole, it opened up a lot. Really, the entrance was just a disguise. Underneath, the space was the size of quite a large room, open in the center, but with Feagle-sized galleries around the walls from floor to ceiling. They were crowded with Pixies of all sizes, washing clothes, arguing, sewing, and, here and there, fighting and doing everything loudly as possible. Some had hair and beards tinged with white. Much younger ones, only a few small inches tall, were running around with no clothes on and yelling at one another at the tops of their little voices. After a couple of years of helping to bring up Wentworth, Tiffany knew what that was all about. There were no girls, though. No wee free women. No, there was one. The squabbling, bustling crowds parted to let her through. She came up to Tiffany's ankle. She was prettier than the male Feagles, although the world was full of things prettier than, say, Daft Woolly. But, like them, she had red hair and an expression of determination. She curtsied, then said, "Are ye the big job hag, mistress?" Tiffany looked around. She was the only person in the cavern who was over 7 inches tall. Yes, she said. More or less, yes. I am Fionn. The Kelda says to tell you the wee boy will come to nae harm yet. She's found him, said Tiffany quickly. Where is he? Nay, but the Kelda knows the way of the Queen. She didn't want you to fash yourself on that score. But she stole him. Aye, 'tis complicated. Rest a wee while. The Kelda will see you presently. She is not strong now. Fionn turned around with a swirl of skirts, strode back across the chalk floor as if she was a queen herself, and disappeared behind a large round stone that leaned against the far wall. Tiffany, without looking down, carefully lifted the toad out of her pocket and held it close to her lips. Am I fashing myself? She whispered. No, not really, said the toad. You would tell me if I was, wouldn't you? Said Tiffany urgently. It'd be terrible if everyone could see I was fashing and I didn't know. You haven't a clue what it means, do you? Said the toad. Not exactly, no. She just doesn't want you to get upset, that's all. Yes, I thought it was probably something like that, lied Tiffany. Can you sit on my shoulder? I think I might need some help here. The ranks of the Knack McFeagle were watching her with interest, but at the moment it appeared that she had nothing to do but hurry up and wait. She sat down carefully, drumming her fingers on her knees. What'd you think of the wee place, eh? Said a voice from below. It's great, yeah? She looked down. Rob Anybody Feagle and a few of the Pixies she'd already met were lurking there, watching her nervously. Very cozy, said Tiffany, because it was better than saying, how sooty or how delightfully noisy. She added, do you cook for all of you on that little fire? The big space in the center held a small fire under a hole in the roof, which let the smoke get lost in the bushes above and in return brought in a little extra light. Aye, mistress, said Rob Anybody. The small stuff, bunnies and that, added Daft Woolly. The big stuff we roast in the chalk pit. Sorry, what was that? Said Tiffany. What? Said Rob Anybody innocently, his hand firmly over the mouth of the struggling Woolly. What was Woolly saying about roasting big stuff? Tiffany demanded. You roast big stuff in the chalk pit? Is this the kind of big stuff that goes bah? Because that's the only big stuff you'll find here in these hills. She knelt down on the grimy floor and brought her face to within an inch of Rob Anybody's face, which was grinning madly and sweating. Is it? Ach, well, in a manner of speaking, is it? 'Tis not thine, mistress, shrieked Rob Anybody. We never took an aching ship without the leave of Granny. Granny Aching let you have sheep? Aye, she did that, as payment. Payment for what? No aching ship ever got caught by wolves, Rob Anybody gabbled. No foxes took an aching lamb, right? Nor no lamb ever had its eyne picked out by Corbies, not with Amish up in the sky. Tiffany looked sideways at the toad. Crows, said the toad. They sometimes peck out the eyes. Yes, I know what they do, said Tiffany. She calmed down a little. Oh, I see. You kept away the crows and the wolves and foxes for Granny, yes. Aye, mistress. Not just kept 'em away, neither. said Rob Anybody triumphantly. There's good eating on a wolf.
Aye, they kebabs up a treat, but they're not as good as our ship, though.
Wooly managed before a hand was clamped over his mouth again. From a hog, you only take what is given, said Rob Anybody, holding the struggling brother firmly. Since she's gone, though, we take the odd old you that would have died anyway, but never one with the aching mark, on my honour. On your honour as a drunken rowdy thief, said Tiffany. Rob Anybody beamed. Aye, he said, and that I got a lot big reputation to protect there. That's a true thing, mistress. We keeps an eye on the ships of the hills, in memory of Granny Aching, and in return we take what is hardly worth a thing.
And the baccy too, of course.
And then once again Daft Wooly was struggling to breathe. Tiffany took a deep breath, not a wise move in Feegle Colony. Rob Anybody grinned nervously. You take the tobacco the shepherds leave for my grandmother.
Oh, I forgot about that,
squeaked Rob Anybody.
But we always wait a few days in case she comes to collect it herself. You can never tell with a hag, after all. And we do mind the ship's mistress. And she would not grudge us, mistress. Many's a night she share a pipe with a kilda outside of her house, on the wheelies, and she's not to be let good baccy or get all rainy. Please, mistress.
Tiffany felt intensely angry, and what made it worse was that she was angry with herself. When we find lost lambs and such like, we drives them here for when the shepherds come a-looking, Rob Anybody added anxiously. What did I think happened, Tiffany thought. Did I think she'd come back for a packet of Jolly Sailor? Did I think she was still somehow walking the hills looking after the sheep? Did I think she was still here watching for lost lambs? Yes, I want that to be true. I don't want to think she's just gone. Someone like Granny Aching can't just not be there anymore, and I want her back so much because she didn't know how to talk to me, and I was too scared to talk to her, and so we never talked, and we turned silence into something to share. I know nothing about her, just some books and some old stories she tried to tell me and things I didn't understand, and I remember big red soft hands and that smell. I never knew who she really was. I mean, she must have been 9 once too. She was Sarah Grizzle. She got married and had children, 2 of them in the shepherding hut. She must have done all sorts of things I don't know about. And into Tiffany's mind, as it always did sooner or later, came the figure of the blue and white China shepherdess, swirling in red mists of shame. Tiffany's father took her to the fair at the town of Yelp one day that not long before her 7th birthday, when the farm had some rams to sell. That was a 10-mile journey, the farthest she'd ever been. It was off the chalk. Everything looked different. There were far more fenced fields and lots of cows and buildings that had tiled roofs instead of thatch. She considered that this was foreign travel. Granny Aching had never been there, as said her father on the way. She hated leaving the chalk, he said. She said it made her dizzy. It was a great day. Tiffany was sick on cotton candy, had her fortune told by a little old lady who said that many, many men would want to marry her, and won the shepherdess, which was made of china, painted in white and blue. She was the star prize on the hoopla stall, but Tiffany's father had said that it was all cheating because the base was so wide that no one through it in a million could ever drop the hoop right over it. She'd thrown the ring any old how, and it had been the 1 in a million. The stallholder hadn't been very happy about it, landing over the shepherdess rather than the gimcrack rubbish in the rest of the hall. He handed it over when her father spoke sharply to him, though, and she'd hugged it all the way home on the cart while the stars came out. Next morning she proudly presented it to Granny Aching. The old woman had taken it very carefully in her wrinkled hands, stared at it for some time. Tiffany was sure now that it had been a cruel thing to do. Granny Aching had probably never heard of a shepherdess. People who cared for sheep on the chalk were all called shepherds, and that was all there was to it. And this beautiful creature was as much unlike Granny Aching as anything could be. The China shepherdess had an old-fashioned long dress with the bulgy bits at the side that made it look as though she had saddlebags in her knickers. There were blue ribbons all over the dress and all over the rather showy straw bonnet, and on the shepherd's crook, which was a lot more curly than any crook Tiffany had ever seen. There were even blue bows on the dainty foot poking out from the frilly hem of her dress. This wasn't a shepherdess who ever wore big old boots stuffed with wool and trampled the hills in the howling wind with the sleet being driven along like nails. She'd never tried that in a dress to pull out a ram who'd got his horns tangled in a thorn patch.
This wasn't a shepherdess who put up with a champion shearer for 7 hours, sheep for sheep, until the air was hazy with grease and the wool blue with cussing, and the champion gave up because he couldn't cuss sheep as well as Granny Aiking. No self-respecting sheepdog would ever come by or walk up for a simpering girl with saddlebags in her pants. It was a lovely thing, but it was a joke of a shepherdess, made by someone who probably never seen a sheep up close. What had Granny Aiking thought about it? Tiffany couldn't guess. She seemed happy because it's the job of a grandmother's to be happy when grandchildren give them things. She'd put it up on her shelf, and then Tiffany on her knee and called her my little jigget in a nervous sort of way, which she did when she was trying to be grandmotherly. Sometimes, in the rare times Granny was down at the farm, Tiffany would see her take down the statue and stare at it. But if she saw Tiffany watching, she'd put it back quickly, and she'd pretend she meant to pick up her sheep book. Perhaps Tiffany thought wretchedly the old lady had seen it as a sort of insult. Perhaps she thought she was being told that this is what shepherdess should look like. She shouldn't be an old lady in a muddy dress with big boots and an old sack around her shoulders to keep the rain off. The shepherdess should sparkle like a starry night. Tiffany hadn't meant to. She'd never meant to, but perhaps she had been telling Granny that she wasn't right. And then a few months after Granny had died, and in the years since, everything had gone wrong. Wentworth had been born, and then the Baron's son had vanished, and then there had been the bad winter when Mrs. Snapperly died in the snow. Tiffany kept worrying about the statue. She couldn't talk about it. Everyone else was busy or not interested. Everyone was edgy. They'd have said that worrying about a silly statue was silly. Several times she nearly smashed the shepherdess, but she didn't because people would notice. She wouldn't have given something as wrong as that to Granny Aiking now, of course. She'd grown up. She remembered that the old lady would smile oddly sometimes when she looked at the statue. If only she'd said something. But Granny liked silence. And now it turned out that she'd made friends with a lot of little blue men, who walked the hills looking after the sheep because they liked her, too. Tiffany blinked. It made kind of a sense. In memory of Granny Aiking, the men left the tobacco, and in memory of Granny Aiking, the Knack McFeegle minded the sheep. It all worked, even if it wasn't magic, but it took Granny away. Daft Woolly? She said, staring hard at the struggling pixie and trying not to cry. Is it true what Rob Anybody told me? Daft Woolly's eyebrows went up and down furiously. Mr. Feegle, you can please take your hand away from his mouth, said Tiffany. Daft Woolly was released. Rob Anybody had looked worried, but Daft Woolly was terrified. He dragged his hat off and stood holding it in his hands as if it was some kind of shield. Is all that true, Daft Woolly? Said Tiffany. Oh, Whaley, Whaley. Just a simple yes, or a simple aye or nay, please. Aye, it is, blurted out Daft Woolly. Oh, Whaley, Whaley. Yes, thank you, said Tiffany, sniffing and trying to blink the tears away. All right. I understand. The Feagles eyed her cautiously. You're nae gonna get nasty about it, said Rob Anybody. No, it all works. She heard it echo around the cavern, the sound of hundreds of little men sighing with relief. She didn't turn me into a pismire, said Daft Woolly, grinning happily at the rest of the pixies. Hey, lads, I talked with a hog and she didn't even look at me crossways. She smiled at me. He beamed at Tiffany and went on, and you ken, mistress, that if you hold the baccy label upside down, then part of the sailor's bonnet in his ear become a lady with name. Oh, there it goes again, accidentally nearly throttling you, said Rob Anybody, his hand clamping over Woolly's mouth. Tiffany opened her mouth, but stopped when her ears tickled strangely. In the roof of the cave, several bats woke up and hastily flew out of the smoke hole. Some of the Feagles were busy on the far side of the chamber. What Tiffany had thought was a strange round stone had been rolled aside, revealing a large hole. Now her ears squelched and felt as though all the wax was running out. The Feagles were forming up in 2 rows leading to the hole. Tiffany prodded the toad. Do I want to know what a pismire is? She whispered. It's an ant, said the toad. Oh, I'm slightly surprised. And this sort of high-pitched noise? I'm a toad. We're not good at ears, but it's probably him over there. There was a Feagle walking out of the hole from which came, now that Tiffany's eyes had become accustomed to the gloom, a faint golden light. The newcomer's hair was white instead of red, and he was tall for a pixie. He was as skinny as a twig. He was holding some sort of fat skin bag bristling with pipes. Now there's a sight I don't reckon many humans have seen and lived, said the toad. He's playing the mouse pipes. They make my ears tingle, Tiffany tried to ignore the two little ears still on the bag of pipes. High-pitched, see? Said the toad. Of course, the pixies hear sounds differently than humans do. He's probably their battle poet, too. You mean he makes up heroic songs about famous battles? No. He recites poems that frighten the enemy. Remember how important words are to the Nakmakfeegle? Well, when a well-trained Gonagle starts to recite, the enemy's ears explode. It looks as though they're ready for you. In fact, Rob Anybody was tapping politely on Tiffany's toe cap. The Kelda will see you now, mistress, he said. The piper had stopped playing and was standing respectfully beside the hole. Tiffany felt hundreds of bright little eyes watching her. Special sheep liniment, whispered the toad. Pardon? Take it in with us, the toad said insistently. It'd be a good gift. The pixies watched her carefully as she lay down again and crawled through the hole in the stone, the toad hanging on tightly. As she got closer, she realized that what she'd thought was a stone was an old round shield, green-blue and corroded with age. The hole it had covered was indeed wide enough for her to go through, but she had to leave her legs outside because it was impossible to get all of her into the room beyond. One reason was the bed, small though it was, which held the Kelda. The other reason was that the room was mostly full of, piled up around the walls and spilling across the floor, was gold. That is the end of chapter 6. We'll see you soon.